Love is, in its essence, the project of making oneself loved, wrote Sartre. But what happens when that project is one-sided? When he says, I don't want anything serious, and yet he still stays there, present, seeking you out, desiring you, confusing you. You accept his terms, thinking you're in control. You say it's all fine, that you don't want to pressure him, that you're enjoying the moment. But in the silence of your night, something gnaws at you. The question that echoes isn't about him. It's about you. Why do you keep waiting for someone who has already told you he isn't willing to choose you? This video is an invitation to discomfort, but also to liberation. We're going to explore the psychology behind the man who runs from commitment, the invisible mechanisms of your insecurity, and more than anything, the path back to your own freedom. Because to win here is not to conquer him. It's to conquer yourself back. Let's begin with the first self-deception, the illusion of control. You tell yourself it's all fine, that you also don't want something serious, that you're living in the now, that what matters is the connection, the moment, the lightness. But is that really true? When he doesn't reply for hours, your chest tightens. When he posts something and you're not included, your mood shifts. When he says, I like you, but I don't want labels, you pretend it's enough. And the strangest thing, you convince yourself that this stance is powerful, that those who don't demand anything are superior, that the woman who doesn't get attached is the most evolved version of modern femininity. But Sartre would call this bad faith, pretending something doesn't hurt when it does, taking on a role that protects you from rejection but pulls you away from authenticity. You become a character just to stay by his side, a woman who accepts anything as long as he doesn't leave, and in the process, you erase yourself. Bad faith isn't a lie to the other, it's a lie to yourself. It's saying, I'm okay, when in reality you're falling apart. It's trying to convince your body that everything is light, when your stomach is at war. You want him to change. But honestly, do you want him to change? Or do you want to change the meaning he gave you? You want him to see you differently, to choose you, to confirm that you're worth it. And that's where the game is lost. Because you hand over your value to the validation of someone who never promised you anything. The control you think you have is actually panic in disguise. Panic of losing, panic of being alone, panic of facing the void. But freedom begins when you look into the void and don't turn away. He wants you near, but he doesn't want to include you. He desires you, but he doesn't choose you. And you, accepting so little, convince yourself you're in charge. But tell me honestly, what kind of control depends on someone else's desire to exist? Deep down, you don't just want to be with him. You want to be the woman who made him change his mind. You want to be the exception, the living proof that this time, he'll want something serious. And that is the most seductive trap. The fantasy of being so incredible that even the most commitment-averse man will give in. But that isn't control. It's submission disguised as cleverness. It's emotional investment without a contract. It's planting seeds in soil he's already said he doesn't want to cultivate. The first victory comes when you realize you no longer need to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. Now let's talk about him, the man who spells it out. I don't want anything serious. And yet he continues seeking you out, involving you, keeping you close. The first thing you need to understand is that he's not being confusing. He's being honest. You're the one who's confused, hearing, I don't want anything serious, and translating it as, he's not ready yet. He'll change. He just needs time. But no, what he's saying is exactly what he means. The problem isn't his communication, it's your emotional listening. The man who doesn't want commitment isn't necessarily cruel, he's simply projecting his own freedom. Sartre reminds us that to will is to project oneself beyond what one is. And this man is projecting a future in which he's free to desire, to explore, to feel, without being responsible to anyone but himself. He doesn't want a bond, because that requires choice, and choice demands renunciation. A bond implies presence, listening, consideration, and that compromises the image of total freedom he wants to maintain. But pay attention, that doesn't mean he's truly free. Often this refusal of commitment is also a form of bad faith. He flees effective responsibility while pretending to be transparent. "I warned you," he says, as if putting up a warning sign at the gate justifies leaving someone bleeding on the other side. This kind of man never gives himself because he's terrified of losing control. He believes that to love is to weaken, that to get involved is to become imprisoned, and so he stays in liquid relationships where he can enter and exit whenever he pleases, where he can desire you today and vanish tomorrow, where he can lavish you with intense praise and then disappear without notice. And you, in your attempt to understand him, lose yourself. You believe that if you act the right way, he'll see your value, that if you don't pressure him, he'll realize you're different, that if you're patient, he'll change. But what you're doing is bargaining away your dignity in favor of a project that isn't yours. You're betting on a future he never pledged to deliver. The psychology of this man revolves around preserving his emotional space without allowing you to occupy any. He wants the warmth of your body, but not the weight of your presence. He wants the security of your affection, but not the consequences of your devotion. And why does this attract you so much? Because perhaps you're also afraid of being alone, afraid of taking control of your own life, afraid of looking within and facing what's empty. But here's the hardest truth. He will not change, because he is already being who he wants to be. He doesn't want a relationship. He wants access to your body, to your ear, to your affection, without having to offer structure, presence, or commitment. You cannot beat him at his own game. The only way to win is to step out of it, to acknowledge that it's okay to desire love, but that this demands reciprocity. And if there is no reciprocity, what there is loneliness shared by two. You look at yourself in the mirror and no longer know exactly who's looking back. The image you see is blurred, shaped by his expectations, by his reactions, by how much he shows, or doesn't show, that he wants you. Sartre calls this being for the other. When we stop being subjects of our own existence and start to exist only in the reflection, the other returns to us. When you begin to wonder if you're interesting enough, beautiful enough, light enough, not because that doubt was born in you, but because it has come to be determined by his validation or rejection of you. You start measuring your self-esteem by the time he takes to reply on WhatsApp, by how many compliments he gives you, by how many likes he leaves on your photos, by how often he reaches out, and suddenly you see yourself as a shattered mirror, a fragmented reflection of the crumbs of attention he offers. This is where it becomes dangerous, because the less he validates you, the harder you try to prove your worth. You start to perform, to change your tone of voice, to choose words that please him, to control your reactions so you don't seem needy. You begin to live to maintain the image of the incredible woman who demands nothing. All of this to avoid being abandoned. All of this to be seen. But that visibility is false, because it's not about who you are. It's about who he's willing to see. And that, my friend, will never be enough. There's a brutal difference between being loved and being tolerated, between being seen and being used as scenery for someone else's emotional comfort. And the more you strive to become the perfect woman in his eyes, the further you drift from yourself. You transform into the reflection of his desire. And in that transformation, you lose what's most valuable, your authenticity. And the question you need to ask yourself now is painful, but essential. Who are you when he isn't looking? If your answer is emptiness, that is where your rescue begins. You didn't notice when it started, but little by little you began to live waiting for a message, an invitation, a sign, anything that might indicate he, perhaps, has changed his mind, that he's realized you're different, that he's finally decided to choose you. This waiting is treacherous. It doesn't scream, doesn't despair, doesn't scandalize. It disguises itself as patience. You tell yourself you're respecting his time, that he needs to sort out his issues, that you don't want to be intrusive. And so time goes by, and you fade away. With each silence, you shrink. With each absence, you invent excuses for him. He's busy. He's afraid to get involved. He doesn't want to repeat past traumas. And the more he distances himself, the more you romanticize that absence. Because admitting that he won't come back, or worse, that he was never really present, would be unbearable. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. The waiting that paralyzes is a form of abandonment. Only it isn't he who abandons you. It's you abandoning yourself to continue waiting. You freeze your plans, your desires, your freedom. You avoid meeting other people. You tone down your expressions so as not to scare him away. You silence your will so you don't seem intense, all in the hope that one day he'll notice. You build an emotional project grounded in the denial of the now, because the now is insufficient. It's frustrating, it's uncertain, so you project. You fantasize. You imagine a future in which he finally recognizes your worth. But what you're doing, in practice, is refusing reality. And Sartre would say, there's no escaping reality without falling into bad faith. Pretending this waiting is light, wise, strategic, when it's corroding you inside, is lying to yourself. You're not waiting for him. You're postponing the decision to choose yourself. Every waiting is a choice, and every choice is a renunciation. Each day you wait for someone who has declared they don't want to be all in is a day you renounce the possibility of being whole with yourself. It's not about haste, it's about presence. Who's truly with you right now? Perhaps for the first time, you realize this absence isn't new. It only laid bare the absence that already existed within you. Being alone. That might be the idea that scares you the most. Not because you need someone to live, but because deep down, his presence muffles the inner noise. While he's around, even without commitment, you are distracted from the void, from the absence of meaning, from the pain of having to look at yourself without effective crutches. But Sartre reminds us, solitude is the essential condition of the human being, not as punishment, but as a starting point. It is in solitude that you discover who you are when no one is watching. It is there that genuine freedom is born, because there's no one left to pretend for, to please, or to conquer. The problem is that solitude often doesn't come alone. It brings insecurity, fear of rejection, the feeling of not being enough, and you begin to believe that his presence, even incomplete, is better than total absence. But stop and think, why are you so desperate not to be alone? Could it be because you never learned to accompany yourself, to choose yourself, to love yourself with the same intensity you expect to be loved? You were taught, from an early age, that being chosen is the pinnacle of a woman's value, that a desired woman is a complete woman, that another's love is a kind of existential certification. But that is a trap. Sartre and Beauvoir, partners in life and thought, were never prisoners of each other. They chose each other repeatedly, without blind contracts. Each was free to leave, and therefore, to stay was a choice, not an obligation. That is what true love demands. Two freedoms meeting, without imprisoning each other. Two presences adding up without canceling each other out. You are not ready to live that while you fear being alone. Being alone is not failure. Failure is accepting anything to avoid silence. It's filling the void with relationships that don't truly see you. It's negotiating your boundaries just to avoid facing the depth of your own existence. Solitude can be a crossing, a portal, a place of reconnection with what you lost trying to be what he wanted. Can you be alone with yourself? Not as punishment, but as an act of respect, because perhaps that's the first step to refusing halves. The time has come to rewrite your story, not the story with him, yours, because your life cannot continue to be a footnote in the narrative of someone who didn't even want to be the protagonist beside you. You've spent too much time adapting, trying to fit in, shaping your words, your desires, your silences, pretending lightness, when what you yearned for was surrender. But now it's time to stop acting and start putting yourself out there as you really are. Authenticity is frightening because it reveals, it confronts, it runs the risk of not being accepted, but only in authenticity is there freedom. And as Sartre said, to be free is to want to be free. So what does it mean to want yourself free? It means no longer waiting to be chosen, and beginning to position yourself as someone who chooses, someone with criteria, limits, desires, and a voice, who won't accept less in order to avoid nothingness, who won't feign independence while silently begging for affection. To do this, you need to establish your own existential terms, not those society imposed on you, not those you copied from the idea of a mature and detached woman, but your own. What are your emotional boundaries? What do you no longer negotiate? What do you deeply desire and are willing to assume, even if it drives away people who can't offer you the same? Take a piece of paper. Write, "These are my terms," and list what you will only accept living from now on. Clarity, presence, reciprocity, truth. Write it in whatever way makes sense to you, but write it. Next, write something else. The letter you will never send. A letter to him. Say everything you felt, everything you waited for, everything you pretended didn't hurt. It's not to send. It's to set yourself free, to take out what consumes you inside. You don't need to confront him. You need to find yourself again. This rebuilding isn't quick, nor painless, but it is yours. And in that reconstruction, you will realize you lost nothing, because what he offered was never whole. You only lost the illusion. The woman who stands in authenticity never loses. She may scare those not ready, but she inevitably attracts everything that is real. True victory isn't about conquering him. It's about conquering yourself after having lost yourself trying to be what he needed. Perhaps you entered this video wanting to know how to make him change his mind, how to reverse the game, how to be the exception. But now, perhaps you've realized, the only game worth winning is the one that happens inside you, because you are not a prize waiting to be recognized. You are a project in motion, a being in construction. And when you stop asking to be chosen, something shifts. You begin to become irresistible to those who have eyes to see. He can keep saying he doesn't want anything serious. He can continue orbiting, appearing now, and then offering halves as if they were the whole. But now, you're no longer in that place. You're no longer waiting, you're choosing. And perhaps, for the first time, you're choosing yourself. Sartre said, "What matters is not what they did to you, but what you do with what they did." And what did they do to you? They made you believe that loving is accepting less, that desiring means silencing yourself, that being intense is too much. But now, what will you do with that? You transform. You decide. You create. Victory isn't making him come back. It's not wanting him to stay anymore. It's having the courage to face solitude not as lack, but as power. To see yourself whole, even when the other withdraws. To keep being yourself, even without an audience. That is freedom. The hardest freedom. The most precious. And it's here, within your reach. All you have to do is stop running after someone who runs from himself and start walking toward your own truth. What will you do with this freedom? That is the choice no one else can make for you. You've come this far, and if you've come this far, it's because something inside you already knew, already sensed, already shouted. This discomfort you feel isn't weakness, it's awareness. It's your freedom demanding space. Today, you've seen that it's not about understanding him, deciphering what he feels, or figuring out what to do to make him change. The only answer that matters lies within. What you accept, what you desire, what you decide. Recapping everything we've covered. You learned to recognize bad faith disguised as lightness. You understood the logic of someone who says they don't want anything serious, yet keeps showing up. You noticed how much you were seeing yourself only through his eyes. You realized that silent waiting is a form of self-abandonment. You confronted the fear of being alone and turned it into a starting point. You rewrote your terms. You reclaimed your authenticity, and you discovered that true victory has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with you. Now, you have a choice. You can return to the same old cycle, waiting for crumbs, romanticizing silences, justifying absences. Or you can begin a new project, a project of yourself. Choosing yourself every day is the most radical act of freedom there is. And you? Will you keep waiting? or will you start living? If this resonated with you in any way, share in the comments. At what moment did you realize you were abandoning yourself? I want to know who you're choosing to be from today onward.